Episode 62, Keith Ingalls, the Raymond Corporation.
I was working at Toyota at the time. Initially, I got to make this mistake a couple of times actually, but
I'm Mark Raybon. This is My Favorite Mistake. In this podcast, you'll hear business leaders and other really interesting people talking about their favorite mistakes. Because we all make mistakes. But what matters is learning from our mistakes instead of repeating them over and over again. So this is the place for honest reflection and conversation, personal growth, and professional success. Visit our website at myfavoritemistakepodcast.com. For show notes, links, and more, go to markraybon.com/mistake62. Please subscribe, rate, and review. And now, on with the show. Our guest today is Keith Ingalls. He is with a company called Raymond Corporation. He is a TPS manager. Now, for those who are aficionados of the movie Office Space, this is not that TPS. It means Toyota Production System. So we'll have a chance to explore some of that today. But first off, Keith, thank you for being a guest here on the podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So before we talk about your favorite mistake and mistakes and corporate culture, it might be helpful for the audience for you to give a little bit introduction about Raymond, where you fit within the corporate family tree, and why Toyota Production System is relevant to that.
Sure. No, that's a great question, Mark. So Toyota has the ownership of Raymond Corporation today. Raymond's been around for many years and actually has had a big impact in material handling. They actually patented the pallet. They also put a patent on the first narrow aisle equipment for narrow space warehousing. And about 20 years ago, Toyota acquired Raymond. So Raymond was very fertile soil for innovation and quality. And blending with Toyota's thinking of Toyota Production System, this is a way to kind of speed up that continuous improvement process. So Raymond was a really fertile soil for that thinking and that culture to take root. And so we took Toyota Production System, we adapted it at our factory, and later we've been working throughout our network of distribution and dealers, our solution and support centers, to embrace that same philosophy. And it's yielded a lot of success for us.
Yeah, and we've got a longer conversation that Keith and I did in a podcast series of mine called Lean Blog Interviews, where we really take a real deep dive into the Toyota Production System and the work that they're doing at Raymond and how that's all transferable to other settings. So I'll make sure there's a link to that discussion in the show notes for those who want to take that deeper dive. That was a really good conversation that we had about that. But since this is my favorite mistake, Keith, I'll go ahead and throw it right back to you. Thinking back to your career and the work you've done, what is your favorite mistake?
One of the big ones I made and kind of inspired me from our last conversation, I tell this story a lot. I was working at Toyota at the time. Initially, I got to make this mistake a couple of times actually, but the first time, the biggest, was I had some continuous improvement knowledge, but I'd never been exposed to 5S. And 5S is a system, that a lot of people hear about. And I got taught 5S for the first time and very excited about it. I got it as sift, sort, sweep, standardize, and sustain. There's different ways to teach it, but I got very excited in the instruction. I thought, oh, this is great. This is housekeeping and organization. We're going to clean the place up. Totally makes sense. I'm very excited. I go back to our service team and our sharp service team. We have large shops in our facilities where we bring in forklifts for service, big overhauls, and mass work, heavy work. And our shop was a mess. It was not clean. It's like, we're going to apply 5S in the shop. So we taught 5S to the crew. They thought, oh yeah, we'll clean this place up. It'll be great. So we got together. We took a week, and at the end of every day for several hours, we scrubbed, we cleaned. We have floor scrubbers, we elbow grease and cleaners, and man, we cleaned it. We thought we got rid of a lot of stuff because we kept emptying trash cans. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is great. Now, Mark, this might surprise you, but because we all worked in the shop together as a team, we all knew where everything went and belonged. So we didn't need any visual support. We were good. So we didn't put any visual in place because we all knew where everything went.
No need to mark, for example, where tools or equipment would go, as people might often do.
No, we didn't need to do that. Yeah. It wasn't necessary. It's a waste of time and effort. So we had this well in hand. Boy, that shop was clean and we were happy. So over the next few weeks, Mark, a couple of things we started to learn. One, we weren't the only people going in the shop. There were parts people coming in. There were field service people, sales people, all kind of people coming in the shop. They didn't know where anything went. And they kept putting stuff and borrowing stuff and moving it. They put it in the wrong place. Like, oh, that was frustrating. The other thing we did, we realized we were busy. A lot of times was we're busy. And I would walk out through the shop and talk to the team. And, hey, it's starting to get messy again. And I got this response. Well, we're busy today, but we're going to catch up tomorrow. We'll catch up tomorrow. Oh, that sounded reasonable to me. For the next about a month, it sounded reasonable. So now we're like 2 months past. Mark, I go walking in the shop and I'm looking around like, I can't tell we'd cleaned anything. This is not good. So we're trying to deliver good customer service here, and we can't find tools and things. We got to fix this. All right, let's get back together as a team. What do we have to do? We didn't mark anything or put any visual support. Yeah. I remember I'm talking about home location. What's that? Oh, okay. So we did a smart thing, which was painter's tape and marker, and we started putting positions in. We didn't get too fancy at first because we didn't really know what we were doing, so we had a learning curve. We started marking things. The first thing that I observed, or we learned as a team, was if people borrowed something that weren't familiar with the shop, if they know where it goes, they'll put it back where they see it goes.
Right.
So I realized people weren't what we call disrespecting the area. They weren't disrespecting the area because they were trying to mess up our workspace. They were disrespecting it inadvertently because they didn't know where anything went, and we hadn't showed them. So we did that. We also started putting more cleaning equipment around, and we also added a 5S Friday just to clean up. Now, I know that's not the way to do 5S to build that, but to build the habit, we would take an extra half hour planned every Friday for sure. So we were only getting at most a week behind before we'd start to make an impact and return. We also did another smart thing that was sort of planned, but it had a bigger impact than I realized at the time. Was we had a service technician training roster that showed all the experience and all the special training every service tech had. Now, all techs are trained in the core equipment, but there's specialty equipment, odd stuff that we don't work on all the time, and not everybody's trained on it. So, but we had that visual up, and if you needed to know who was trained on something, you could go out and look at that and go, whoa, and you know who to ask for help or support. So that turned out pretty well. So we started sustaining, and then we started realizing this is going in the right direction. So that was pretty good learning. This 5S stuff's maybe a little more than housekeeping. It starts to dawn on me.
Yeah.
So I moved the clock ahead a few years, and I'm a Raymond organization. And I go into a shop facility and say, well, go ahead and walk our shop. Give us some feedback. Tell us what you think. So Mark, I walk through the shop and I'm looking around. I'm going, man, this looks like my shop when I was at Toyota. It's not great. Stuff everywhere. It's chaos. And I talked to the management team and said, how would you like to clean this area up? Turns out that was a hot button for some of the managers. And some were saying, yeah, our field techs are really bad about coming in and it's a mess and they leave it a mess. I'm like, whoa. I had enough experience at this point, at least to say, we haven't set a standard or expectation. So think about this. They're coming into a messy shop. They do their work and they leave it a mess because that's what they came into. So there's nothing telling them that that's not okay. Right. So if you walk in sight unseen, it's a mess and that's okay. So crew said, all right, that all makes sense. So as a group, and it was a big group, and they decided, well, let's get everybody together for a week. Like, this sounds familiar. It's like deja vu. Let's get everybody together for a week. We're going to clean up the whole shop.
Right.
So I'm raising my hand. I'm like, I don't think that's going to work. Oh, yeah, it'll be great. It'll be great. I don't think it will. Just not my experience.
Right.
So sure enough, we clean up the whole shop. Mark, guess what we didn't do again? No visuals. Where did the tools go? No visuals. Well, everybody cleaned it up, so it's good. We all know, right? Same
mindset of, we all know. We all work.
We all know.
No.
Exactly. So we cleaned it up, and sure enough, it was the same stuff all over. We don't have the visual support. People are going through the shop, they're messing it up and sliding back again. But at least this time I could coach and start saying, all right, we're going to fix small areas, and make visuals and start to turn it around. And then when the techs got involved, we learned their workspace is important to them, and they needed to lay it out themselves. So they needed some autonomy, and they needed visual support. Now, at first, there was a lot of pushback because they would say, I don't need visuals. I know where my tool goes. Okay, do you ever loan that tool out? Well, sure. Okay. Do people try to bring it back? Yeah, but they always put it back in the wrong space. Hey, we can help you fix that. I got to mark my tools. Yeah, something simple, cardboard and outlines, right? Something simple, quick, not expensive, not time consuming. So we started doing that, and little by little, we started weaving in this concept of visuals and sustainment. And then as we keep doing this, it gets better, and it starts to catch in the shop, and people realize they like being able to walk over and find what they need, and they kind of like having a clean shop. And then the last piece of my learning to this discussion came into focus for me. I often talk about this process. It's like looking through a set of binoculars, and you kind of focus it, and the picture's kind of blurry, but it gets sharper and sharper and sharper. And this was a moment where my vision sharpened. We had some new techs come in. Now, at this point, the shop's pretty clean, and it's got visual support. We had a couple new techs come in. All the tools they need are visualized. All the supplies they need are visualized. Here's a truck that's broken. They came in with a technical background, but they had no specific Raymond training, no specific Raymond skills. Said, here, go fix the forklift. Well, I don't know how yet. I haven't been trained yet. Oh. So this is where that concept we talked about last time, workplace readiness. So we gravitate towards get the tools and supplies in the area, right? So this is the first time it dawns on me. Workplace readiness really means the knowledge, skills, and experience of the people. Because no matter how great I set those tools up, and no matter how I've got all those supplies ready, if I put someone that doesn't know what to do and how to use those things, they cannot get that repair completed. Right. So I'm like, well, this is fascinating. So then it occurred to me for the first time, 5S is not housekeeping. It starts as housekeeping, but it's really about workplace readiness.
It may look like housekeeping.
Yeah. It does. You get that clean area, and you get those before and after, and it's pretty and it's organized. But why do we have it clean, and why do we have it organized? Right. It's about executing for the customer a better experience, because we're trying to get to deliver things on time, defect free. And the way we do that is have the tools and the supplies there, but also the knowledge, skills, and experience of our people. So that's the first time that it really dawned on me that that foundation of the system. When you talk about this as a system that comes together, the foundation of that system is a ready workplace. Right. And the visuals are part of it, and the clean organization is part of it. But the bigger piece is your people, and then know why it's clean and organized. Because if you just tell them to clean up, guess what? Mark, I get a lot of pushback on that. They don't want to clean up. But once they realize cleaning up helps make their work easier, right? That's the magic of the fifth S, the sustain piece, right? If people know this stuff works, they'll do it. And then it becomes cultural. And when it's cultural, it sustains. Until it's cultural, you're going to fight with it. So I spent a lot of time and effort cleaning up shops. And if anybody has a big area and they say, well, I'm going to start my continuous improvement, I'm going to do a big cleanup. Don't do that. I mean, you can, and then maybe if it's good learning, then it's value add time. But I can tell you from experience, it's not going to work.
So there's a lot. So thank you for that. I mean, it's really a kind of rich story. And I think there's a lot to unpack. I mean, I took some notes. There are, I think, different types of mistakes. So one, I think, as you summarize at the end, there's a mistake of misunderstanding what a business concept is about. And in this case, it's about, 5S as part of the Toyota production system. It could be other new things that are adopted in a workplace. Sometimes we misunderstand, and then we learn through experience. So my follow-up question for you, Keith, is, you talk about repeating that mistake. People learning that, well, there is value in marking where our tools go. Is that a quote unquote mistake? Is that a learning that each and every team had to go through on its own for them to really embrace this? Was it really, you almost framed it as a mistake. Was it a mistake, or is that necessary learning?
Well, that's a great question, Mark. And this is where, I continue my learning journey as well in this all the time. As you and I both know, it's never ending. And one of the things I found is one day I found myself coaching. We coach on take waste out of the process, right? So one day I was watching another trainer give we had an exercise in front of some people, and the trainer was giving the answer to the people. And I stopped the trainer and I said, "Hey, you're giving them the answer." And he said, "Yeah, but they're not getting it." I said, "Yes." And I heard, and it never had crossed my mind that I'd realize this. I said, "Yes, but if the struggle adds value, it's not waste." Because we call waste non-value add, right? But if the struggle adds value in the form of I've learned, it's not waste. By definition, it's not waste. So I think you bring up a great point. This is kind of like learning to ride a bicycle. I can show you PowerPoints. I can ride the bicycle around for somebody else, but until you get on it yourself, you don't get it. You don't get it. A lot of the systems the same way in my experience. I can tell people, "Oh yeah, having a clean, organized place will make your easier." "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Okay. I don't get a lot of pushback on that, but I get pushback on the effort. Yeah. The other thing is they'll go bananas with visuals. They'll go from no visuals to, visualize everything, outline where the stapler on your desk is. If you're the only one using that stapler, you don't need that. I know where that goes. If you open your drawer and there's pins in a little slot that are laying there, I maybe don't need to know that's the pen slot because it's rather obvious. So yeah, there's always learning with it. But workplace readiness is what we're really trying to get to.
And in your story, you also talked about, maybe we can talk more generally about what I heard you describe as the mistake of blaming individuals for what might be a systemic problem. We say, well, they're being messy, they're being disrespectful, but as I heard you say, the structures hadn't been put in place for them to be able to respect. I think of like a parking lot example. When there are lines painted, generally speaking, people will park between the lines. Now, if we had a parking lot that was completely unpainted, it might be easy to come out and be judgmental of like, well, look at that driver, they're a jerk. They parked too far away from the other cars. But without lines, how would they really know, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. Parking lot's a great example because it's one of those standards we see. And haven't we all complained about that person either gets to or over the line? And I could park there if they had moved over a few inches, right? Yeah. So there becomes that, and hopefully positive peer pressure. But you're right. It's another piece of that culture is allowing people to learn from mistakes. And that's sometimes difficult because it's like that trainer, I've got to give them the answer. They're not getting it. They've got to work through it. And if it doesn't come to them through their own conclusion, it won't stay. And if they do it wrong, they're going to remember it. You and I think agree that mistakes are great teachers. Mistakes are like, "Oh, I did that wrong. Now it sticks." If I happen to get it right the first time, I might have just gotten lucky. I might not have learned nearly as much. So.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the themes of the podcast series here in general is, we all make mistakes. Hopefully we're learning from them. And that requires at some point a cycle of personal reflection, or a coach or somebody prompting us to think about how things went and did it go the way we expected? If not, what do we learn from that? How do we adjust? So can you talk a little bit more about that culture, either at Toyota or within Raymond Corporation as part of the Toyota family tree? How do you create a culture where it's okay to talk openly about mistakes and to reflect and to make sure that we're learning from them instead of hiding and covering up the mistakes so then it ends up just getting repeated?
Well, that's a great question, Mark. And to start off, first I'll say it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of work that's well worth it. If you can get people to open up, and I've had this conversation with a lot of trainers and coaches over the years. My best guess is we're taught even from young to hide mistakes because we get blamed for them. If you found a mistake, you must be the one that made the mistake. Not necessarily. So we have this process of unlearning and we teach that mistakes are positive. In fact, sometimes in some areas of the business, we refer to them as treasures, just to get people to embrace finding them and bringing them out. Because ultimately, we can't fix a problem that we cannot find. If we can't find that problem, we sure can't fix it. And as well, that sounds obvious. It's not, because people don't want to bring it to attention because they had bad experience bringing problems to light.
Right.
So you have to reinforce, and you have to have a lot of buy-in from your leadership that mistakes are okay, and that's a positive thing. In service business, as an example, we focus on what's broken. And so it tends to be a negative focus because that's our value add, right? We fix the broken. So we're always looking at the broken, So it can give a negative bent. These concepts apply to any kind of business. So let's talk about workplace readiness. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're a dentist, if you're a chef, it doesn't matter. Whatever your customer needs, having that workplace ready is going to help you. Now, the details and particulars of a workplace, including the knowledge, skills, and experience of the person, is going to change from service and product, but the general concept is really important. So the culture becomes the driving piece. It's important to serve my customer. How do I do that better? And starting to remove mistakes and problems from that customer experience, it takes a lot of work and effort. And companies that learn to do it well, it's like they just skyrocket past competitors. So is it worth it? I'd say it is.
So it seems like, there are different categories of some of these mistakes. There are mistakes of understanding or misunderstanding, mistakes of bad assumptions. Like you mentioned earlier, the assumption of, well, we all know what our tools and supplies are, and we all know where they go. That was discovered to be a bad assumption. And there was learning and improvement that came from it. And then, the other thing that stands out, just kind of trying to summarize and repeat back what you were saying, this idea of working through it on their own. Like I would kind of agree that maybe that's not a mistake, that's a necessary process. It's the difference between, giving a fish versus teaching somebody how to fish. And learning to fish, not just by looking at a PowerPoint slide or a video on fishing, that working through it on their own may very well be necessary, or as you put it, value add. It makes me think of the Toyota-ism of go slow to go fast, or maybe make up a variation. Sometimes going slower means you have better sustainment, and long run you're more effective. Is that fair to say?
It is, and there's a lot of things that kind of go into that. So when you rush to do a quick repair of something, a lot of times you're attacking a symptom and not the root cause, right? So you'll put a bandage over something and think, oh, that's good enough, but you haven't really considered the problem deeply enough, and it turns out you didn't resolve it. A problem well defined is a problem, half solved. So we tend to work at a really quick pace. So it becomes counterintuitive that slowing down is better. When we teach plan, do, check, act, or we talked a little bit about that last time, but when we teach that, more planning helps reduce the overall time because your execution's smoother, your check and your act or your adjustment time is shorter. So, but planning doesn't always feel like doing. And so we want to rush into do, and we don't have a really good plan yet. So it takes a deliberate effort to be able to engage that culture and that thinking. And it takes some practice. You got to build it into a habit.
Sure. So that's a great point. And, to wrap up a little bit, Keith, you talk about helping others, and, the Raymond Corporation and you and others there are helping others by making resources available, free resources that others can learn from. Tell us a little bit about that, and to the audience, I'll make sure we have links to these resources in the show notes and the webpage for this episode. But Keith, can you talk about some of the things that you have that others can go and learn from?
Absolutely. So a lot of our material and continuous improvement, we do white papers and we do various published works that we put out there and available. And a lot of this comes from learning internally first, not so much helping customers, but it evolves into being able to help customers and talk to them. And things like one of the things we talk about, we have a lot of automated solutions, and automated solutions are great, but we actually talk about optimize before you automate. Mm-hmm. And we want you to look at your processes before you start throwing equipment solutions at it. So you get the right solution. And it's that slow down piece that you're talking about. We have solutions that'll speed things up, but if the process is making a lot of defects, we just sped up your defect rate and you're going to have a bad experience. So we try to put things out there that we've learned and we've done in our network. It's been learning for us because we adopted the Toyota production system. We weren't born into it like a lot of Toyota companies. So while we were fertile soil for that to grow, that culture of innovation was there. It helped us be more structured and more methodical about it, and helped speed that process up, to your point, by slowing down and being more deliberate. So we've put a lot of resources out there, and a lot of times we can be a coach, and we're willing to share experience with certainly with our customers of where we've struggled and what we've learned. And we're trying to put more and more white paper material and published works out there to share, because it's a journey that's fun to take, and we want other people to take it with us, because that makes healthy companies, and we want to deal with healthy companies too, right? We all want to be good and successful.
Well, thank you for that, and again, the quick tip series and other white papers and resources. I'll make sure those are available. So again, our guest has been Keith Ingalls from the Raymond Corporation. He is the TPS manager, and again, this might be new to some, the Toyota production system, as being part of what Keith has been talking about embracing and building there at Raymond. So Keith, thank you so much for sharing your story and your reflections. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed it.
Again, I want to thank our guest, Keith Ingalls, for being here. I want to also thank the Raymond Corporation for making Keith available to share his insights and stories and advice with us. For show notes, links, and more, again, you can go to markgraban.com/mistake62. And I hope this podcast inspires you to reflect on your own mistakes and how you can learn from them or turn them into a positive. I've had listeners tell me they've started being more open and honest about mistakes in their work, and they're trying to create a workplace culture where it's safe to speak up about problems, because that leads to more improvement and better business results. If you have feedback or a story to share, you can email me, myfavoritemistakepodcast@gmail.com. And again, our website is myfavoritemistakepodcast.com.